The rain had been falling for hours, tracing silver lines across the kitchen window. Frank sat at the small wooden table, his hands resting on the pair of worn boxing gloves. They felt heavier tonight, not from leather and laces, but from the weight of every choice, every mistake. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and old memories. Outside, a sudden burst of shouting broke the silence. Frank rose, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. Two young men stood outside the corner market, their voices sharp, their bodies tense. The old shop owner tried to wave them off, but the threat in their tone was clear. Frank watched for a moment, then stepped back from the glass. Not his fight. Not yet. He left the house, pulling his coat tighter against the cold drizzle. The streets were slick, the neon lights of the old town distorted in every puddle. Halfway down the block, a black sedan slowed to a stop beside him. Two men stepped out, faces he knew from another life, when fists weren't the only way to end a fight. "Boss wants to see you," one of them said. Frank kept walking. "That chapter's closed." The man's smirk cut through the rain. "It's not a chapter, Wolf. It's the whole book. And you've still got a page left to write." As they turned to leave, one dropped an envelope onto the wet pavement. Frank picked it up. Inside was a faded photograph. Emma, heavily pregnant, standing beside a tall man in a dark suit. The face was unfamiliar, but the eyes, cold and confident, belonged to the one running the crew now. Hours later, the Whispers found him. The crew had been pulling kids into underground fights, brutal, bare-knuckle matches for money and control. And one of those kids was the boy he'd seen days ago, the stubborn spark in his eyes, impossible to forget. By midnight, Frank was walking toward the city's edge, rain soaking through his coat. The abandoned warehouse loomed ahead, light spilling in thin, jagged lines through the boarded windows. Inside, the bass of cheap speakers rattled the floor. The smell of sweat, smoke, and blood clung to the air. Men pressed around a crude ring lit by swinging bulbs. Faces hid in shadow, voices blended into a single hungry roar. When Frank stepped inside, the crowd shifted. Whispers turned into a ripple of recognition. The wolf had walked back into the den. There was no choice. A young fighter stepped into the ring, taller, faster, unscarred by years. The bell clanged, and the fight began. The kid's fists came quick, but Frank had faced quicker. Every blow was a reminder of the bright lights, the deafening crowds, the years he'd left behind. Blood ran from his lip. His breath came ragged, but he fought with the kind of fury you don't learn in a gym. One last hook. The kid hit the mat. The crowd screamed for the finish. "End it!" Frank stood over him, chest heaving, and shook his head. He wasn't here to give them what they wanted. From the far edge of the ring, a voice cut through the noise, slow, cold, familiar. "I didn't do this for you, Wolf. I did it for the boy." Frank turned toward the shadows. The man stepped forward just enough for the light to catch his smile. "I already keep him close, just like I kept his mother close." The words hit harder than any punch. Frank froze, the noise of the crowd fading into a hollow silence. The rain outside seemed to stop. And deep inside, after all these years, the wolf felt the hunt calling again.